Hello, I'm Dr. Jigare Pancha, an occupational therapist. So here I have got you the another video of infections and tumors of musculoskeletal system. There are many more videos to know more things. Stay tuned to our channel. So in this class we'll be talking about the three things and in the first slide, that is about the acute osteomyelitis, in the acute multifocal hematogenous osteomyelitis, then neonatal osteomyelitis, and also uh, spondylodiscitis. So in case of acute multifocal, so in this we say the in the pathogenesis and diagnostics, that is this fortunately is very rare, and also the hematogenous dissemination from an acute site of infection simultaneously to several bones, and not to be confused that in this, if you say that the chronic recurrent multifocal osteomyelitis, that is CRMO, is different basically, and the pathogens are generally staphylococci, as I always mentioned. Also in the previous lecture we mentioned that in all the ages staphylococcus aureus is always being found. So and also a temporary impairment of the immune system is assumed to be an etiological factor, but however, if you see, it is not yet been possible to prove actually the immunodeficiency. So that's why it's not you cannot just comment properly, or can label, just to comment, not to label basically. And primary symptoms include pain in various parts of the body, as well as the signs of general sepsis, like fever, fatigue, cardiovascular instability, elevated inflammatory parameters. So both small children and adolescents may be affected. Skeletal scintigraphy makes it easier to locate the sites of inflammation. An MRI is used to identify abscesses. Also, in the therapy, there are different, like the administration of the antibiotic in high dosages, surgical debridements of sites of infection, which is very much better as compared to the other forms also, because because here the infection is completely removed, and means the debridement of the sites of infection, abscess or necrosis. And appropriate treatment at a very early stage is the only way to ensure the adequate healing of this form of osteomyelitis. Then also there are other forms like neonatal osteomyelitis. So in this pathogenesis, like the clinical findings in neonatals are fundamentally different to those of the older children, and this is due to particular circulation in the metaphyseal epiphyseal area, where a significantly greater number of blood vessels cross the epiphyseal plate. So other factors are the distinctive spectrum of the pathogens and immune system, which is an immature stage of development. So in diagnosis, if you see, so this is hampered by the lack of verbal communication. Fever and increased ESR levels are often not present, so which can result in incorrect interpretation. Then it is important to look for the indication for the indirect signs, like limited mobility of the affected extremity with compensatory movements like pseudo paralysis, which is to be seen. And then you have hyper sensitivity to touch, extended position. Also you have poor general condition, means the total weakness as such. Then swelling and reddening generally already signify the presence of purulence within the joint. In neonates, extensive destruction, penetration of the purulence into the joint, and definitive damage to the epiphyseal plate and the joint cartilage can quickly occur basically. So in neonates, the spectrum of the pathogens is more varied than in the older children. So the long-term sequelae can be very severe if there is a damage to the epiphyseal plate or the joint at this point. Also, this image which you see is the image of the neonatal uh, osteomyelitis. The image on the left side. So here is in the interest of the that in the acute osteomyelitis, the although which is very rare complication in neonates, is a diagnostic and therapeutic challenge due to the immature immune response. Neonates are more susceptible to the osteomyelitis than are older children. So preterm infants are at a higher risk of osteomyelitis because of the, you can say, uh, because of frequent blood drawing in invasive uh, monitoring procedures and intravenous drug administration. Early diagnosis of the neonatal osteomyelitis might be difficult because of the paucity of the clinical features and the symptoms, but has to be included in the differential diagnosis when late onset or prolonged neonatal sepsis is present, as outcome is dependent on rapid diagnosis and immediate start of the treatment. Also, in the epidemiology, in the Western countries, the incidence of the osteomyelitis and the septic arthritis is 5 to 12% per one leg infants. The overall incidence rate for the bone and infection and joint infection is 0.12 per 1000 live births and 0.67 per 1000 neonatal ICU care admissions with a mortality rate of 7.3. So some recent studies have also reported an estimated incidence of 1 to 7 per 1000 hospital admissions for neonatal osteomyelitis. So, in a review of more than 300 cases of the neonatal osteomyelitis, male infants are seen to predominate over females, that is 1.6 is to 1 ratio, and preterm infants to be at a higher risk than the term infants, that is 8 to 10. So, the risk factor of the osteomyelitis and septic arthritis in preterm infants are mostly iatrogenic, including invasive procedures in intravenous or intraarterial uh, catheters, parenteral nutrition, ventilator support, and bacteriemi with the nosocomial pathogens. So, like that, so in the microbiological, if you see that the neonatal osteomyelitis is arises as a consequence of the hematogenous spread of the microbiome or the microorganisms, which is the most common route of infection. In preterm infants, neonatal osteomyelitis frequently result with the direct inoculated bacteria secondary to the heel and venipuncture and umbilical catheterization, infected uh, cephal hematoma, and premature rupture of the membranes and transplacental infections have also been described as a risk factor for the neonatal osteomyelitis. These are the certain risk factors. Again, Staphylococcus aureus is found in all the age groups, and Streptococcus agalacti and gram-negative organisms, E. coli basically, and Klebsiella pneumonia and also important bacteria in the neonatal period. So if you see the pathogenesis, the hematogenous infection of the long bones, which are most frequently affected, begins in the capillary loops of the metaphysic adjacent to to the cartilaginous growth plate, that is physis. So these areas are very susceptible to uh, hematogenous infection because of the highly vascularity and because the blood flow within the vessels is slow. So bacteria can pass through these gaps from the sinusoidal veins to the capillaries into the tissue, where they are provided an ideal environment to grow and resulting in abscess formation. So this abscess frequently rupture the joint in neonates, and acute hematogenous osteomyelitis and septic arthritis coexist up to 76% of all the cases, resulting in unique vascular anatomy of the epiphysis. And for the diagnosis, mainly the clinical features we see, as I mentioned here. So the in general there are two distinct clinical symptoms, syndromes have been postulated. Maybe first is the benign form with a little or no evidence or infection other than the local swelling, whereas the other is the severe form with the predominant manifestation of the sepsis like syndrome with the multiple bone site being noted as manifestation. In neonates, almost half of all the cases involve two or more bones. So, as the clinical symptoms and signs of osteomyelitis in neonate are at first frequently unspecific and mild. So, they may include temperature instability, feeding intolerance, irritability, or reduced movement, frequently giving rise to the uh, suspicion of the secondary sepsis. Fever is a rare condition again that can be explained by a rather poorly developed immune system. Even as the disease progresses, the more specific signs may become present, including the disability, local swelling, and erythema. Focal tenderness over a long bone should catch the uh, attention of the doctors as well. In laboratory finding, again, CRP levels are to be indicated in this elevated ESR, CRP, erythrocyte sedimentation rate should be monitored in response to it. Imaging techniques like MRI, which is high specificity of 94%, sensitivity of 97%, the diagnosis of acute osteomyelitis. In treatment, again, the cure is of the osteomyelitis is during the newborn period is very much successful, and is also dependent on the fast and true diagnosis and sufficient treatment, because empirical selection of the antibiotics depends on the age and the clinical situation of the infant. So the antimicrobial therapy should be started as soon as the diagnosis is made, and directed against the most common bacterial isolates responsible for the hematogenous osteomyelitis according to the age group. And so that's why if we say that the duration of the treatment depends on the extent of the infection, the clinical response, and the presence of underlying risk factors. So in the case of unifocal osteomyelitis, the continuation of the treatment for 6 weeks, and in the case of complex disease defined the multifocal significant bone destruction, resistant unusual pathogens, septic shock, continuation of more than the 6 weeks to the months might be required. And also in the prognosis, if you say that there's several studies have documented a poor outcome even if the modern treatment facilities. So in neonates, the reported incidence of the permanent sequelae varies from 6 to 50%. So neonatal osteomyelitis can lead to permanent joint disabilities, disturbances in the bone growth, secondary to the damage of the cartilaginous growth plate, and limb length discrepancies, arthritis, decreased range of motion, and pathologic fracture. So these all things are to be taken in consideration. And also, as I mentioned, that if the treatment is started at the very early phase, then it is very much curable. And as the conclusion, if we say that the neonatal osteomyelitis, although a rare complication, remains a diagnostic and therapeutic challenge and poses the infant at a high risk of long-term morbidity. So osteomyelitis should be considered in newborn infants presenting with clinical signs of sepsis but lacking of the obvious focus, in order to facilitate early diagnosis and prompt initiation of the appropriate therapy. So these all things to be considered. If we say further, if we talk about the uh, spondylodiscitis, so the diagnosis of a septic uh, spondylitis or spondylodiscitis is often delayed. So symptoms in the abdominal area may be a mistaken of the of the appendix, and high and thigh pain, or means the hip or thigh pain, basically if you say, or difficulty to walk may also be predominant. So localized tenderness or pain or percussion as well as extended spinal position are indicative of this condition. And uh, and so the, so that's how this particular form takes place in the consideration. And if you go in detail, that the spondylodiscitis, which is can be defined as a primary infection accompanied by destruction of the intervertebral disc, that is discitis, with secondary infection of the vertebrae, that is spondylitis. So starting at the end plates, and it can also lead to osteomyelitis of the spinal column, and it has a high morbidity and mortality, and is a rare but serious infection. So pathogens should be considered early at this stage, causing spondylodiscitis basically are Staphylococcus again, Escherichia coli, and Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So the spinal infections can be described etiologically as pyogenic granulomatous, that is tuberculous, brucellar, fungal, and parasitic. So pyogenic spinal infections may be include uh, spondylodiscitis, term encompassing the uh, vertebral osteomyelitis, spondylitis, and discitis. So the chronic, if you say in the anatomical way, that the intervertebral disc is located between the adjacent superior inferior vertebral bodies and links them together. So the function of the disc is particularly mechanical, namely transmitting the loads rising from the body weight and muscle through the spinal column. So it has a central nucleus pulposus which surrounds the annulus fibrosus and cartilages and plates. So when the intervertebral disc is axially loaded, most of the weight can be absorbed by the nucleus pulposus, while the annulus assist in diffusing compression forces so carried out on the nucleus. So also the cartilaginous end plates are located along the central oasis end plates of the adjacent vertebral bodies, overlie the superior and inferior margins of the nucleus pulposus. So if you say that the typical vertebra, the vertebral body is composed by certain parts of the body, weight bearing part, vertebral arch, which protects the spinal cord, then the process spinous, the process transverse left and right, articular process, two superior, two inferior, that help to restrict the movement. In the beginning of the pyogenic spondylodiscitis, the anterior aspects of the vertebral end plate will abrade. So also loss of disc height, gradual development of osteolysis, or further destruction of the subchondral plate will manage. So later on there will be more destruction in the vertebral body and new formation of the kyphotic deformity can be seen in this. Also, if you say that there are certain predisposing factors for this, like diabetes mellitus, age, cardiovascular disease or high blood pressure, obesity, drug abuse or chronic steroid intake, chronic alcoholism or nicotine abscess, HIV infections, and other infections, endocarditis, urinary tract infections, multimorbidity, serious traumas, impairment in immunocompetence, chemotherapy, HIV, cancer, sickle cell anemia, renal failure, liver failure, chronic hepatitis, liver cirrhosis, rheumatic disease. So these are certain causes if you see in this. Then the cause of the spondylodiscitis are also assigned to be larger number of bacteria, fungi, which is to be taken into consideration in diagnostic treatment of the patients. So there are certain clinical presentation characteristics like the symptoms are non-specific, diffuse, and uh, precarious. So basically, back or neck pain, consistent pain, more worse at night, radicular pain radiating to the chest or abdominal, fever, spinal deformities like kyphosis, gibbous formation. Then you have neurological deficits like leg weakness, paralysis, sensory deficit, radiculopathy, sphincter loss, one by third of the cases, one third of the cases basically. So cervical lesions, spinal tenderness, restricted range of movement, paravertebral muscle spasm, local tenderness, motor deficits like limb weakness, para or tetraplegia or para or tetraparesis, epidural abscess formation, weight loss, mortality 2 to 17%, irritability, limping, refusal to crawl or sit and walk, hip pain, abdominal pain, incontinence, maybe presenting a feature, uh, then continence or then loss of lumbar lordosis, lower back pain or back movement, and compared to adults, even children are less likely to have a comorbidities and neurological deficits which are uncommon. So again, there are certain very differential diagnoses also like erosive osteochondritis, osteoporotic or pathological fracture, cancer-related destruction, ankylosing, then Charcot joint, small nodes, disc herniation, and again for the diagnostic procedures, we see that MRI is a gold standard that detects any spread of inflammation, and CT scan, PET scan, X-ray, biopsy, C-reactive protein analysis. That's all. So that all things can be considered. Outcome measures like VAS analysis to evaluate therapeutic effects for assessment of pain. Then ODI, there is oscillatory disability index to evaluate therapeutic effects and to assess the quality of life. Then JOA, that is Japanese Orthopedic Association back pain evaluation questionnaire. Then lumbar function score. So this is all the examination which is to be done. Normal examination about the individual, about the demographic information, clinical examination of the pain and other movement, and that to be considered. So and there are certain therapeutic procedure like having uh, exercises, and wearing a corset for a period of 6 to 10 weeks is instead confirm basically the thoracic exercises I mentioned, and also the flexibility exercises for the hamstring can also be performed in these conditions. So this is how you can take care in the form of osteomyelitis and in these three other forms of condition. And here we can talk about the primary chronic osteomyelitis, like primary osteomyelitis. So they associated with Brodie's abscess, and that is the metaphyseal intraosseous abscess formation with no uh, preceding acute stage, and lymphospasma cellular osteomyelitis, like classic primary chronic osteomyelitis. So in this, the etiology can be the bacterial spread via the circulatory system into the metaphyses. Initial local limitation of inflammation over the encapsulation of the site of inflammation, but without abscess formation and generalized symptoms of illness. The relationship between the immunological response and pathogenicity of the microbes appear to be different to the acute forms. So the bacteria are only found in around 30% of the cases, evident due to the low level of virulence. Clinical findings and diagnosis, if you see that the variable and specific clinical findings, often a pseudo or minor trauma, initially draws attention to underlying pain that was clearly present, already present basically, and syndromes gradually become more pronounced over a period of weeks or months. The patient ultimately, you can say, either recovers spontaneously or symptoms continue to worsen. So there is usually no generalized response to the body from the body, the meaning that there are no typical inflammatory parameters. So if the primary diagnostic using conventional X-ray imaging fail to indicate the presence of osteolytic site of infection despite increasing non-specific pain, localized swelling, or symptomatic treatment using immobilization or administration of the anti-inflammatory medication is started. So if the symptoms worsen despite continuing this kind of therapy over a period of 2 weeks, detailed imaging based diagnostic are indicated. So it is also to go for the respect the pain and to even go for the further investigation. uh, and generally, if you say the laboratory diagnostics are generally normal and no signs of inflammation, and in imaging you say X-ray imaging, MRI play important role in diagnostic role, and however they are often difficult to interpret, and it is not uncommon that they are initially negative. A typical finding is an osteolytic or metaphyseal site of infection. Biopsy is again very important to consider, that is indicated to the osteolytic sites of infection. A tumor is also possible as a differential diagnosis, collection of the several tissue samples of bacteriology, aerobes and anaerobes, and histology. So histology is often unspecific with just a few inflammatory cells. If there is no bacteria growth or bacterial growth, proceed with broad spectrum PCR, or calorimeter may also be useful in addition. Further, in therapeutic way, if you see that the careful debridement, that is curettage of the site of infection as thoroughly as possible, multiple sample collection, the material intended for histology must be not be fixed in the formaldehyde because of the biochemical analysis. So, and also suspected tumor may be due to risk of contamination do not combine with the biopsies. That is another form of investigations which can be considered. Post-operative treatment, that is functional treatment, possibly with the use of the continuous passive motion unit when localized in the lower extremity. Relief with crutches depending on the severity of the deficit. Say if the necrosis was not removed, and if it's entity during primary surgery, if the bone defect develops bacterial superinfection, or if the local signs of irritation or abscess formation develop as the condition progresses, secondary radical resection is carried out further. So that is another form which is being seen. Also, follow-up examination is very important. Post infection deformities is to be carried out. That is, objectives of clinical and radiological follow-up every 6 to 8 weeks is ensure that no super infections are overlooked, and to monitor the uh, spontaneous infilling of the bone deficit. There should be a gradual increase in weight bearing. Further radiological follow-up after 6 to 12 months is to be considered, and maybe sometimes not to consider the scintigraphic follow-up to be necessary, as a regeneration process uh, can take a long time, and accordingly increasing uptake levels are seen in another 6 to 12 months. So that is not to be in the gold standard at the point of time. Long-term follow-up after 2 years is aimed to identify the clinical deformities like differences in legs length, diaphyseal deformations with inactive infection sites, for example, outgrowth of the bone, then overgrowth disturbances with increased length, then direct, partial, or complete epiphyseal closure may be rare. Then in growth disturbances, that can be the growth uh, prognosis that depends on the type of osteomyelitis. Growth stimulation is much more common than the growth impairments. So these all things to be considered in this form of analysis and intervention. So that's all for the today's class of the osteomyelitis. And these are the references for as you can refer this for further studying and going deeper into the topic.